Okay, the essential question for our first lesson is how do we add, subtract, multiply, and divide positive and negative numbers? So we'll start with the adding. We'll do a few rules and then some practice after each of those topics. So with adding, there are two cases. First, you have that the two signs are the same. So if the signs are the same, you want to add the two numbers. Okay, just add them like you always have. Then your answer is going to have the same sign. Okay, so if the signs are the same, you just add the numbers like you always do, and the answer is going to have the same kind of sign as your number. If the signs are different, so that means one number is positive, one number is negative, it's a little bit different than when they are the same. In this case, you want to subtract the two numbers. So you take the greater absolute value minus the least absolute value, and I'll tell you what that means here in just a second as we go through our examples. But you subtract the two numbers, and then the answer is going to have the sign of the number with the greater absolute value. So let's take a look at some examples. So first, related to when the signs are the same. So we'll do example 1a. 7 plus 5. So both numbers are positive in this case. So they're the same. So you just add the numbers like you always do. 7 plus 5, which is 12. And then your answer is going to have the same sign as your numbers. So since both numbers are positive, your answer is also going to be positive. So another variation of when signs are the same. Let's say we have negative 6 plus negative 8. In this case, both numbers are negative, so your answer is going to be negative. You just add the numbers like you always do. 6 and 8 is 14. So that is your answer. Now, some examples of when the sign is different. So 2a. Say you have negative 5 plus 17. So the absolute value, so let's talk about that real quick. So absolute value of a number, so let's say the absolute value of positive 5, that's just measuring distance. So it makes the number positive. 5 is 5 spaces from 0. If you have the absolute value of negative 5 is also 5 spaces from 0. Okay? So when we're looking at absolute values, you're looking at those positive cases. So the absolute value of 5 is 5. The absolute value of 17 is 17. And remember I said when the signs are different, okay, you have one negative and one positive, the signs are different, you're going to subtract the two numbers. And we do the larger minus the smaller. So 17 minus 5 is 12. And then your answer is going to have the same sign as the larger of those two absolute values. So since 17 was bigger, when you did the absolute value, it's bigger than 5, you're going to do the sign that's on the 17. Since 17 is positive, your answer is going to be positive. So it's a positive 12. 2b, negative 12 plus 3. So we do the absolute values again. So the absolute value of negative 12 is just 12. The absolute value of 3 is 3, and you subtract the two numbers because the signs are different. Okay, we have a negative there and a positive there. So the signs are different, so you're going to subtract the two numbers. 12 minus 3 is 9. So it's going to be 9 for your answer. And then you take the larger of the two absolute values, so 12 was larger than 3, and you use the same sign that was on that original number. So the 12 is negative, your answer is going to be negative. It's a negative 9. Next, we're going to take a look at subtracting. So to subtract the positive and negative numbers, you add the opposite of the second number. So that's the first thing you do. You change the problem a little bit so that it's adding the opposite. And then you follow all the adding rules that we just did. Okay. So let's take a look at some examples. 5 minus negative 3. So the first number always stays the same. We're going to add, so now we start doing changing. So the minus becomes a plus. The opposite of the second number, so the opposite of a negative 3 is a positive 3. So 5 plus 3 is 8. So the answer to 5 minus a negative 3 is 8. So here's another example. Negative 6 minus 4. So the first number stays the same. The minus becomes a plus. That's the adding part. The opposite of a positive 4 is a negative 4. Now my signs are the same. So when the signs are the same and you're adding, you just add the numbers, and your answer has the same sign. So negative 10. One more example. Negative 9 minus negative 2. So first number stays the same. Change it to a plus because you're adding. The opposite of a negative 2 is a positive 2. Then you follow the adding rules. The signs are different this time. You have a negative 9 and a positive 2. So with the negative 9, look at the absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 9 is 9. The absolute value of 2 is 2. And we subtract the two numbers because the signs are different. 9 minus 2 is 7. And 7 is going to have the sign of the larger of the two absolute value numbers. 9 is bigger than 2, and it was a negative number. So your answer is a negative 7. So again, the key with subtracting is adding the opposite. Next, multiply and divide. Okay, so just multiply and divide the numbers as you usually do. Okay, so the multiplying and dividing part never changes. Then to determine the kind of answer you're going to have, you have to look at the signs. If the sign is the same, then it's positive. This rule only works with the multiplying and dividing. Sometimes students will confuse it with the adding rules. So try to remember those two are very, very different kinds of rules. So the same sign when you multiply or divide means a positive number, only when you multiply and divide. If the sign is different and you're multiplying or dividing those numbers, then it's a negative number. Okay, so we're going to look at some examples. Negative 3 times negative 6. So you just multiply the numbers like you always do. 3 times 6 is 18. And since the signs are the same, they're both negative numbers, the same sign means your answer is going to be positive. We're multiplying the numbers, so that's why it's a positive. Negative 7 times a positive 2. Okay, so 7 times 2 is 14, still 14. Now we look to see if our answer is going to be positive or negative. Since the signs are different, you have a negative 7 and a positive 2. The signs are different. Your answer is going to be negative. So that's a negative 14. And it works the same if you divide. So if you have 15, divide by negative 5. Okay, 15 divided by 5 is still 3. And a positive divided by a negative, the signs are different, means it's going to be a negative 3. Okay. And remember, you can also write it this way. So negative 20 divided by negative 4. This time, the signs are the same. Okay, so 20 divided by 4 is 5, and it's going to be a positive 5 because the signs are the same. They're both negative, so it's a positive 5. So now on the left-hand side of your notebook, I want you to copy these problems down and then try to add, subtract, multiply, or divide each one. Please copy the problem down first and then do the work to get to the answer.